Hello, everyone. My name is Yana, and I'm a Google Ads specialist. I help businesses reach their target audience with the right parameters, and I scale online sales for businesses in different countries around the world using those same AI-powered Google Ads tools. And in today's video, we're going to review several advertising campaigns. We had a bit of a fragmented period overall here. I'll explain everything now. Our topic is accessories, specifically pool accessories. We targeted several southern states directly within the US. So, what do we have? We have several types of advertising campaigns. At first, we launched a lot more of them, which you can actually see from the amount of traffic we generated during a certain week in December. But what difficulties did we face? The difficulties were most likely on the client's side. He had a rather slow website. Later on, we found out why it was so slow. But basically, this just proves that no matter how high quality your audience is, if your website doesn't meet at least the minimum technical requirements, from the client's perspective, it's impossible to expect any truly great results. That is, no matter what the misses were, the traffic volumes wouldn't be there. It's just a daily. You can see here, there weren't that many, which is actually correct. But, for example, on the days when we got a few more clicks, it still didn't make any difference. There's just nothing to talk about in terms of results. But here, for example, with a smaller number, let's say, of purchases, things actually got much better. Why did we end up with this fragmented period? So during this time, we didn't run any ads at all and had no clicks, because throughout this whole period, we told the client that there was a real issue with some aspects of their website speed. Not all clients want to deal with this kind of thing. Of course, it's hard to believe until you actually show the real number of clicks compared to the number of sessions and see that there are way fewer users. That is, accordingly, it is clear that no matter what traffic we bring, the speed of the site has a very negative impact on it. Of course, during all this time, the client was negotiating with the contractor about how to fix this whole situation. That's why, for us, this launch month was basically stretched out over 2 separate periods. So, to say that there was some super great result or anything like that just isn't possible, because here we had a few weeks of a sort of launch, and then a few more weeks, so we basically ended up with 1 month that was kind of split up and disjointed. That's why it's better not to split the month up. In other words, it should be a steady growth, a scaling process, so that we can actually have a positive impact on the learning mechanics of those same AI campaigns. At the beginning here, we launched several types of ad campaigns that were supposed to provide feedback. But then it became clear that we had no choice but to turn to 2 basic campaigns, fix, the speed of the site, but conditionally. Here they are, the 2 basic ones. Why 2 basic ones? One of them is PMax directly. By the way, it actually performed quite well and at certain times was even cheaper. And the other one is a regular shopping campaign with manual clicks. Why did we launch it with manual? Well, manual bidding. To be able to look at and test the feed itself, because we had a specific type of pool cleaning product, and not all search queries were suitable for us that PMax could target. In order to assess the overall quality of the feed, whether it needs improvement and so on, and basically to get an idea of the approximate real cost per click. Because if you look, we had both extremely cheap and extremely high costs per click here. We needed to understand why this was happening, and whether we could actually enter a super competitive auction by bidding a higher cost per click to drive sales from there, or if the real issue was with the feed itself and the quality of all these clicks was actually quite low. Because, even with scripts, the Google API won't show you absolutely all the queries that PMax generates. So don't expect that. With some script you'll be able to determine with 100% accuracy which search queries were triggered or not triggered in these PMax campaigns. Because if you analyze your auction statistics and try to compare them with reality, you'll see that they will differ greatly from the queries that PMax shows you. So, basically, we had the standard shopping campaign running. We didn't need all the products. Of course, at different times, our cost per click was sometimes higher, sometimes lower. Well, if you think about it, the cost per click was higher for the simple reason that here we were still trying to, let's say, ramp it up, right? Although here it basically stayed about the same, just so it would actually trigger a significant number of impressions. And in reality, our conversions and sales came from just one product, even though, for example, a few other products were generating some kind of traffic. Did we overpay for this cost per click? Basically, there is some logic to having higher bids because our launch period was split up. At this point, we weren't completely sure whether we were getting the right kind of traffic or not, or if it was entirely the right audience. So basically, this is, well, predictable. But even here, you can see that a conversion appeared in the regular product category. This is yet another confirmation that, basically, the traffic was correct, selected properly, segmented properly, even the top impressions and the queries that led to conversions. Here, if we had continued, if this period hadn't been interrupted and had been consistent and correct, most likely, we would have managed to significantly lower the cost per click, just like it happens in PMAX campaigns, right? In PMAX campaigns, if we look at purchases, the cost is still about the same as what our competitors were paying. But since we didn't know whether the traffic would be the right kind or not, because the product overlapped a lot with other broader queries, and there was also seasonality during that period. So, in principle, this decision was justified and well thought out by the specialist. Could we have gotten even more conversions? I believe, by default, yes. It really was possible to make even more sales. We could have pushed the traffic even further here and generated, well, several times more, up to 5 or 6 conversions per day. That would be by the end of the 3rd or 4th week of support, if this period hadn't been interrupted for us. And also, of course, in reality, we lost a lot, well, quite a lot of time here. We lost some time just getting this whole thing going, thinking and assuming that we really had a problem with traffic, that some strong competitors had entered the market, that we didn't manage to launch on time because the client actually launched later than the recommended date. But it turned out that the problem was the website's very slow speed. Like, really, really slow. We're not talking about those benchmark seconds we usually mention, but about having to wait 8 to 10 seconds for the site to load. That's just way too long. Honestly, with the high competition in the States, and users being so spoiled by great design and user experience, it was almost impossible to expect anyone to wait that long. Unless we were the only store in the whole world, maybe then it would work, but that definitely wasn't the case for us. So, basically, it's possible to get up to 5 sales a day. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to do that in this time frame. For example, you can take the 16th and take a look. So basically, we spent about another week tweaking things here, and you can see that. By the way, the conversion cost was already lower here. Profitability was higher even though, as you remember, our cost per click didn't go down. By the way, this is an argument for the fact that sometimes you actually get more conversions and they're cheaper when targeting hot auctions even with a higher cost per click rather than chasing super cheap click conversions somewhere else. And TI Max became expensive because, even with a pretty high conversion rate, the cost per click shot up. But, in principle, for the PI Max learning mechanism during this period, this could be considered normal. After all, we're looking at a week. A week or two, on the scale of the US, is really not enough time to test the full range of traffic, types of auctions, to see which queries convert better, which ones have a higher conversion rate, and which ones have a lower conversion rate. So, to feel out the whole volume, right? With, say, around $400 a week for this tweaking, we were doing at the end of this period. Well, it's actually pretty funny, considering that the US is a huge, high-volume market. Even for the GEO we were advertising to, it's several times. I mean, it's really significant, really big. There's definitely room to grow there, but, you know, not everything can be done all at once, instantly, or perfectly. So, those were the 2 test options we had for that small advertising budget, the initial test budget. The client wanted to test whether there were sales, how quickly or slowly things could be scaled, and so on. Here's an example of working with small budgets. There were only a few ad campaigns running. We had a very limited product selection, just up to 5 items in each feed. So that's how it was. Is it possible to optimize this and bring the cost per conversion down to under $15? Yes, it is. It just took some time to gather steady traffic and train the AI in these ad campaigns to achieve lower costs. Because, as we remember, at the beginning, PI Max was actually delivering even cheaper results than standard product ads. Standard product ads are now much cheaper because, in fact, their traffic has been cleaned up pretty well, with some assumed negative keywords. And of course, her conversion rate was quite high. So yes, you can definitely bring the cost down much further. The thing is, you always have to be prepared that if we're entering the US or, for example, Australia itself, you need to have patience for at least 60 to 90 days. Anything less doesn't make sense because the analytics will come in slowly. Is it possible to collect this data faster? I'm not sure it can be done faster because it depends on how high quality the analytics we provide to the AI are, since we have to remember, here, internally, we're basically building our own AI agent. So, in reality, each account is unique in how it uses the AI. Regular products are going to be almost identical everywhere. But with AI, we're basically generating our own AI agent, which operates with its own database, its own storage, and its own input and output information. And what we want, in the end, is to fill it with the right information, meaning the right analytics, by showing exactly what we want as the output. If you've ever written a really well-crafted prompt for ChatGPT, even just once, a proper one, not just something like, imagine you're a super awesome marketer and develop a strategy for me. That's way too general. A proper prompt should specify what needs to be done, what shouldn't be done, what result to aim for, what form the feedback should take, which resources to use, which database, and so on. If you've ever crafted a proper prompt, you can probably appreciate just how challenging that actually is. What's more, right now, prompt generation can cost anywhere from $100 to $1,000 on freelance platforms, at the very least, and people might spend 6 to 8 hours working on them. Just imagine how complicated things are right now in the advertising dashboard. And if you could give it the maximum amount of data sets, be patient, and then it would work perfectly. No. From experience, no matter how much the Googlers try to sell it, with their remote sales management, I actually see the opposite situation. It's better when you gradually and systematically teach the AI inside your Google ads to generate the right results. In most cases, 8 times out of 10, this is the best way to scale. Gradual, smooth, predictable, and psychologically comfortable in terms of expenses. Clear examples, these microvariants of getting results that exist. Can it be done cheaper? Yes, it can. We see that from period to period. Here we had the start date. Even on November 16th, we had a long break here. Right around here, if I look, the cost per conversion really did become cheaper. On December 3rd, we had some very specific spikes, because the ad system is also trying to adapt to all the formats and nuances that exist. They tested a cheaper cost per click, a super cheap one, an expensive cost per click, and an average cost per click. And basically, this Remax, by the way, actually showed the most optimal option overall for scaling. Yes, here it had a super high. For example, what do we have here? One of the conversions is really high, and here it's $28, but it can drop to $15 if this period isn't fragmented, if you try to scale it gradually and not all at once. Now we'll just go all in. Beat everyone. Everything is real, everything is practical. And that's why, for example, I even like this performance, no matter how you feel about it. AI tools are going to be in charge now. That's the main trend, the dynamic, and scaling will be done through them in the future. In 2025, it will be really hard to achieve high turnover, just with manual bidding, even if you see now that it's become much cheaper. It will be very difficult to get through this whole period relying only on manual bids. Yes, they will work, but the main growth point, scaling, and comfort will come from AIs. So here's this small, kind of strange, fragmented case, with an explanation of why it happened this way. This is an iteration of very honest cases, not super successful stories, but the kind of cases that are actually very common. It seems like I wouldn't even publish them as super successful cases, but on the other hand, I'm telling you the nuances, what happened here, what influenced the result. I'm showing the dynamics, showing how some of the work was done. I'm showing what was positive, what was negative, and what the stakes were. I'm even showing that with a high cost per click, you can still get a much cheaper cost per conversion. As we saw with the test clicks, right here, if we take these purchases, I'm just showing you the conversions. Let's take a look. It'll probably be easier to see right here. Here's the cost per conversion, right here. And you can see that there's no conversion here. The traffic is good. There's up to $30 here. Yeah. And here's $15, which is the desired cost per conversion. And the average, if we calculate it for this period from January 16th, here you go, from the 16th to the 25th, that's when our support period was. Here you can see that even the average is 33, which is much cheaper than it was overall when calculated for the first time period. The first time period for us is, for example, if we take November. We're spending money. We spent $26. We didn't get any purchases, but there were probably some add to carts. We can check that now. There were no purchases. Well, there was an add to cart, a begin checkout, and that's it. But even here, there were no purchases. So this is an example of not super successful cases, but at least they're honest.